Okay, so let's quickly review some of the steps that we need in order to solve and graph inequalities. I know a lot of y'all were asking questions. Again, remember that it is the same thing as an equation. We're solving it the same way, but let's quickly go through the steps and review, and then we'll quickly talk about how to graph it. So, of course, my first step is to draw or to build my equation. Most of the time, the equation or the inequality will already be there for you, so all you have to do is solve it. 2, isolate the variable. So whatever my variable is, whether it's x, m, y, z, k, we want the variable by itself. Inverse or do the undo operation. So by now we should already know that, of course, when we add, we do the opposite, which is subtract. When we subtract, we do the opposite, which is add. Multiply, we do the opposite, which is divide. And divide, we multiply. By now we should know those inverse operations. Let's go ahead. Step 4, we solve and we check. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. So now let's look at a couple of practice problems and go from there. So before we talk about graphing the inequality, that is one of the main differences between an equation and an inequality, is how we graph it. So make sure that you pay attention to what the inequality is. If the inequality is greater than or less than with no line underneath it, the circle will be open. And the same thing, if it does have a line in it, that means my answer is included with it, and therefore my circle will be closed. Let's talk about the direction in which you would graph. So in this case, whenever my answer is greater than, I would shade to the right, because that's where my positive or my greater numbers are located. When it's less than, look at the back, I will shade to the left. And again, that's where my negative or my less than numbers would be. So again, think of it like that. Okay, let's go ahead and let's look at some practice problems on how to graph. So let's look at this first one. So J is greater than 7. So you have to think about, what does that sound like? So again, we're only highlighting or shading in what's part of that answer. So if we think about it and read it out loud, J is greater than 7. So that means any number that is greater than 7. And with the line not being underneath it, that means the 7 is not included with the answer. So in this case, my circle will be open, and I'm shading it to the right. So all this will be shaded. And again, think of it like this. So therefore we know if I have 8 or 9 or 10, all those are greater than 7. Let's look at another one real quick. This one, 2 reasons why we flip. And we should have talked about this earlier, but 2 reasons why we flip. If my variable is in the back, we have to make sure that my variable is on the left-hand side. Or if we multiply or divide by a negative number. And we'll practice that more in a minute. So in this case, I would flip my whole inequality. So now G is greater than or equal to 1. So I'm going to go to my 1. It's going to be closed because the line is underneath it, saying that 1 is included with my answer. And then I'm going to shade it to the right. Let's look at another one. Same exact process. So again, S is greater than or equal to 5. So I'm going to go to 5. We know that it has a line underneath it, so it's going to be closed. So my circle should be shaded in. And then I'm going to shade it to the right. Last one really quickly, and then we'll look at some solving problems. So in this case, same process, same concept. So we go to my -3. Again, it has that line underneath it, so therefore my dot is going to be closed. And then we're going to shade it to the left. Okay, now let's look at how to solve. So first of all, we have to identify what my inverse is. I'm going to draw my line, because whatever I do to one side, I also do to the other. So in this case, I know this line means divide. The opposite of divide would be to multiply. So I'm going to multiply by 4. Whatever I do to one side, I'm going to do to the other side. This cancels out. So now I have A is less than 10 times 4, I get 40. So A is less than 40. So again, it does not have the line underneath it, so my answer is not included with it. But we know 40 is going to be an open circle, and we're shading it to the left. And we know that because we're looking at the back of my arrow, and we're shading it to the left. So all these answers that we shade in can be a possible solution to my answer. Because 39 is less than 40, 38, 37, 36, 35, all those numbers are less than 40. Let's go ahead and let's try another one. Again, first of all, I'm going to draw my line, identify what my inverse is. So if we subtract, my inverse is going to be add. So I'm going to add 4. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to add 4 on this side, cancels out. So N is less than a negative 12. And again, we know that because it's integers. So if it's the same sign we add, different sign we subtract. So 16 take away 4, I get 12. And since it's more negatives, then it'll be a negative 12. Again, I'm going to go to my answer. It's going to be an open circle because it does not have the line underneath it. And then I'm going to shade it to the left. Negative 3 plus j is less than or equal to 6. Same exact process. Even though we have the number in the front, it already lets us know that it is a negative number. So the same thing I would normally do, plus 3 plus 3. So in this case, j is less than or equal to 9. So 9 would be included with my answer, so it's going to be shaded in or closed. And then I'm going to shade it to the left. Last one really quickly. Again, the same exact process. When we see two things together without a symbol, that automatically lets me know that I'm going to multiply. What's the inverse of multiply? The inverse of multiply is to divide. So I'm going to divide it by a negative 4 on each side. Remember, when we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to flip my inequality, which we'll do at the end. So divide by a negative 4. In this case, I get 8. So it'll be a negative 8. So let me rewrite it. So B is less than or equal to a negative 8. Now, since I multiplied or divided by a negative, I have to flip my inequality. So B is greater than or equal to a negative 8. So now we know it's going to be closed. And it's going to be important because that's going to determine which way you shade in. So make sure you always pay attention to whether you multiply or divide by a negative number or whether your variable is on the other side of the inequality. So in this case, it's going to be closed, and I'm going to shade it to the right. I hope this helps. I will leave a couple of practice problems in your Schoology folder to help you out. Let me know if you have any questions.